This is spelt. That's S-P-E-L-T. It's one of the 7 grains mentioned in the Bible.
It's been cultivated since about 5000 BC based on the records, about that.
Right now.
Heather Darby is a UVM agronomist. This stand of spelt is one of many crops being trialed at Borderview Farm in Alburg.
People are starting to recognize spelt as a flour alternative to wheat flour. It also has a slightly different taste. It's a bit nuttier than wheat, a little more flavorful than most of the wheat flours that you would buy. It's increased in popularity over the past probably 20, 30 years, especially with the organic movement and, sort of this health food movement.
This crop of spelt is the heart of a research project that extends from the field to the kitchen and from the oven to the table.
Our goal is to help farmers find viable opportunities, and then we have a demand for a crop from an end user like a baker, and our job really is to help farmers investigate that through our research and figure out what's viable. And then probably almost more importantly is how do we get the hulls off of the spelt at a scale that really makes sense for Vermont farmers.
Before spelt can be made into flour, it must be hulled, which means removing the shell or hull that encases the seed.
Most wheat, common wheat anyway, is what we call free threshing. So when you harvest the wheat, the seed falls from the hull. But grain crops like spelt and barley and oats, they're not free threshing, and they're protected by this hull that surrounds a seed. And in order to get the seed, you got to find a way to mechanically remove the hull. So we can grow it, but if we can't get that seed out of there, there really still is no market.
Darby researched an Amish-built huller that's been developed to fit the needs of small grain growers. She's testing it out, and so far, the results show promise.
Now there's a viable, cost-effective way to hull it to be able to bring it to market. And a huller could be purchased by a bakery as well.
A baker's day often begins in darkness. The spelt flour has been milled and brought to the test kitchen at King Arthur Baking Company in Norwich, Vermont, so bakers Carrie Brisson and Jeffrey Hamelman can conduct baking tests. Brisson and Hamelman are preparing a sourdough bread using the spelt grown in Alburg. Brisson is the head baker at King Arthur Baking.
Baking with spelt definitely can be a little challenging. It has less gluten than wheat does, so you want to treat it a little differently. I don't want to eat the same thing all the time, and that is where spelt comes into play. It shows just different flavors, so it's exciting to a baker. Yeah, I think that's fine too.
Because this test is for the purpose of research, Brisson has to think and act less like a baker and more like a scientist.
As a baker, I really want that nice finished product, but I also have to, trust that process of testing and being very scientific about it. One definitely was a little coarser and tore a little bit compared to the other one.
It's not as strong.
Yeah, the one variety had just a nicer feel in the hand when shaping it. So I'm very curious about the results.
Brisson is a baker, heart and soul. She sees her role in this project as being one ingredient in the mix that will hopefully raise the market for spelt in Vermont.
First of all, the work that UVM is doing is just so important to our local economy and the state of Vermont. It's unbelievable all the stuff they're doing. So I think supporting that and making sure that we're part of that process just allows for just a bigger picture and just more growth for UVM, and I love to support them. Yeah. It's great to be part of the community of farmers and researchers and bakers.
The first loaves out of the oven look like what Brisson expected. The coarser flour produced a darker loaf.
But they're just a little heavier.
Looks are one thing, but taste is another story altogether.
Each baker gave us a few loaves of each variety, and then we taste them for flavor, mouthfeel, or texture, and then also aroma.
Andrea Rainville is a research assistant with UVM Extension's Northwest Crops and Soils program. She's responsible for compiling the data of what the panelists experience when they taste the bread.
Other sour aromatics? No. The panelists are trained to both pick up the flavor, specific flavor attributes, aroma and texture, and then also to be able to kind of differentiate intensity of those things.
443, 434.
So the scale is 1 to 7. What are you hoping to find?
Really, we're hoping that we can bake great bread.
Having trained taste testers who are not bakers evaluate the bread is part of the scientific rigor that's required by this kind of research.
The trained panel is really trained to pick up specific off notes or specific flavors that we're finding that might be important to the consumer. And so that's kind of why we incorporate the trained panel as well. Research has shown that, the group average is more impactful or more accurate than one single person's kind of input.
The panelists represent the face of the consumer.
We had a control, so we had a wheat. So there were 5 spelts and 1 wheat. Every panelist had 6 different samples to taste.
With 6 samples of each variety and a control, that's 13 pieces of bread that have to be evaluated per sensory session.
It's a lot of bread. Yeah, it is.
Back in the field where it all began, Darby reflects on her role in the project and how her perspective provides only one piece of the puzzle in the research process.
I'm just an agronomist. But, to be able to bring a crop to market, you need all these different pieces. The viable market, the economic component, the agronomy, and then the proper equipment and infrastructure to be able to produce that product that makes its way to a bakery or a brewery. And that's well beyond agronomy. Our goal is to make sure we have viable farms on the landscape. So we got to figure out how to get the whole chain done, or we're not going to be successful. To me, that's a real value of extension. We not only sort of do this research, but we understand the bigger picture about all the different pieces that have to be put into place to make this research sort of move on to the next step, whether it's into a farmer's hands or into the bakery. And, to me, that's like primary role of extension.
Is that door shut?
Research is a team sport, a process in which the players in the journey are as important as the final destination or statistical data. One piece at a time, one slice at a time. In Alberg, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.